What is the most NSFW thing you have seen at your job? Working in a Swedish furniture store on Halloween, and a colleague was completely ducked up on substances, dressed as Fred Flintstone, driving the forklift, screaming, "Yabba dabba do" at customers. That was his last day working there. Story 2. Walked into the office to see my boss absolutely plowing one of my coworkers. They were both dudes, both married, both totally sweaty. Boss gave me $500 to never say anything. Story 3. Not necessarily NSFW, but I found a deceased nurse on the floor of a hospital. She had been missing for hours after she had clocked in on a shift. They went looking for her, called her phone, and found the door to a single locked bathroom that had to be torn down. Poor girl was only 28, apparently passed from a heart attack. From what I was told, she drank energy drinks excessively, and it had finally got to her. Story 4. I worked at KB Toys in the early 2000s. Coworker jumped up on the shelves to pull something down from the overstock rack above, grabbed it, jumped down, and her ring got caught on the grid shelf, pulled her finger off. I never did it again, and I didn't even wear a ring. Story 5. Went into the walk-in fridge, caught the waitress mid-piss. Guy must have been a ducking Jedi master. He remained serene as duck. I would have spit-sprayed that everywhere. Man swallows, looks at me, wipes his mouth as she's frantically pulling up her pants and underwear and goes, "Dime bag of the good stuff if you forget what you saw." Joke's on him, I wouldn't have said anything anyway, except maybe, "Do that crap away from my ducking lettuce, please." Story 6. A small mountain of substances on a table in the green room prior to a gig in Cartagena, Colombia. Just there. Very casual. It was 1982. I'll explain some wild crap about those days. I was musical director for an American artist, paid in USD. In those days, these were the rules in that situation. 1. To take USD out of the country, you had to first play a free concert for Los Pobres. This was a way to placate the masses, so you become a pawn of the substances government for a while. We played ours in a nearby town, in a soccer stadium. People streamed in by the thousand. We played about an hour, then go out in a bus. Authentically scary, as people swarmed. 2. You then had to play a private concert for the people who make it possible to take out US currency. Addict guys, government guys, everybody in a club that seated maybe 250. Reeked of corruption, but everyone very friendly and, shall we say, prosperous. I don't know the financial arrangements for that, but that's where the substances was. 3. Then you got to play the actual ticketed event, the one where the artist got USD and was able to take it out of the country. It's mind-blowing how Byzantine stuff gets when everyone has their hand out for a taste. Story 7. A nurse stripped to just her bra to weigh herself in the triage room, conveniently forgetting that the scale was right under a camera that I was supposed to be watching. I was way too dumb to realize she had to have been doing it on purpose. When it happened, I was mortified more than anything because while she had been sending out friendly, flirty vibes, she was also engaged to be married, and the cover story for her weighing herself at work in the nude was that she was about to go get fitted for her wedding dress. Being the absolute social train wreck that I am, I managed to not only let her know in the most awkward way possible, catching her on the way to her car, but I also managed to make it sound like I was insulting her by wishing her good luck at her dress fitting. But in hindsight, she was very friendly to me prior to this incident. There is no way she didn't know the camera was there. And our last conversation before the stripping incident was about how I rolled back the camera footage and made sure I saw the patient leave that had been creeping her out. So, yeah. Story 8. My coworker likes to show off his junk on his phone to people. Not an impressive or cute junk. Not impressive, so not huge, not cute, so not something you'd want to keep starting at more than 2 seconds. Nothing captivating, special, or memorable. He showed it to a girl and she said, "That's a small junk," and she didn't know it was his, so that must have hurt. Story 9. Caught 2 coworkers kissing in a dark corner at the office Christmas party. One of them was my very married direct superior. Then I caught them again in a parking lot and again at a cafe. After talking to them the next day, because it was getting silly at this point, they admitted that the affair had been ongoing for almost a year. The married one divorced their spouse a few months later, and they took their relationship public. They are still together 27 years later, so I guess it was true, love after all. Story 10. Literally today, a guy didn't lock out equipment he was working on. Stuck his hand inside a dust collector. Rotary valve kicked on and he lost 4 fingers. Me and another guy had to retrieve the fingers. I took the rest of the day off and sent all my reports home until after the holidays. Story 11. When I was in my teens, I worked at a pizza place. One of the other cooks, who was my age, went to Dollar General for milk, and while he was there, he found a thong for sale. Little while later, I went into the walk-in to find said cook wearing nothing but that thong, waiting for someone to walk in there. Story 12. Many years ago, when I was still in desktop support, An exec got a virus, was getting tons of pop-ups, his browser was redirected to adult sites, and he couldn't update McAfee. I was just getting into forensics and found the file that was infected, stopped the processes and services causing the issue, etc. It was a PPT full of hentai. I deleted it and let him know it was gone, but didn't say I saw what was in it. I update McAfee and it cleans up some more files and he's blushing hard, but also thanking me. I go to the CEO and let him know, but he's weirdly nonchalant about it. The next day, B is infected again. He had disabled McAfee and downloaded the same file. So I clean the PC, then find the script in the PPT causing the infection, clean it out, and leave him with a clean copy. It wasn't even very good. Story 13. An 8-inch turd somebody casually left on the ground in a toilet cubicle between the toilet and the door. Docker closed, and as you open it, you get served that spectacular display of human waste sausage. Story 14. Helping a patron with something on their phone that required looking in their photos, Google search history. He acted like the adult film was just invisible right in front of me. Story 15. Was working as tech support for a TV company. We required pictures of any TV issues to verify warranty claim. Someone sent in a picture of their TV with 2 men doing stuff. The TV itself was cracked in the top right corner. Story 16. Was a bartender, bar and wait staff for 9 years. Mainly did seasonal summer work across Australia, working pop-up bars and festivals. Witnessed NSFW behavior from all genders, of all ages, of all walks of life, of all ethnic and cultural backgrounds. Alcohol doesn't discriminate. My most memorable incidents included walking into the portable toilet block of a pop-up bar on a bright Sunday, deathly hungover from a staff decompression session the night before, to find some considerate bloke had taken a giant runny crap in the urinal the night before, and it had slowly dried in the searing heat. From the splatter pattern, it was evident that the person had turned their back to the urinal grate, leaned forward slightly, and unleashed the combination of greasy festival truck food and copious amounts of alcohol against the urinal wall and hadn't had much luck with accuracy. NIE events were always characterized by rampant substances use, and that was just the staff. And numerous times we caught couples engaging in a due substance. At a private function at a hotel once, we had closed the bar and started clearing decorations and leftovers when a rhythmic bumping noise from the toilets replaced deafening crapty remixed hits from 2020. It was a very well-dressed couple who were absolutely mortified to be caught in the act and did their very best to maintain dignity when being escorted out of the venue. Numerous fights and brawls. Once I worked in a nightclub for a few months and witnessed a large and angry African woman king hit a bald security guard from behind with her stiletto. It left a dent on him. Another time, I cleaned a pool of blood after a glassing incident between clashing young men. It was so big, it looked like someone had smashed a full bottle of red on the floor. I felt sick cleaning it. That person lost an unbelievable amount of blood. Other times I saw both men and women throw glassware at each other for being rejected or just arguing violently for whatever alcohol-fueled reason. Otherwise, a lot of flashing from young drunken women who hadn't discovered boob tape or were oblivious to the fact that everyone could see every bare detail beneath very short skirts when they ascended stairs to the top level. Or public urination on the fake festival grass, with no attempt to hide it or be modest. Witnessed a lot of disgusting locker room talk and casual harassment from old guys usually directed towards said drunken, vulnerable young women. Also witnessed a lot of disgusting locker room talk from middle-aged women after one too many glasses of Sauvignon Blanc. I think the main thing I took away from that life was not to automatically respect people older than me, as that was instilled in me as a kid. Now I know the world is full of scummy, drunken filth, whether they are all powerful at 65 and wearing a nice suit or nice dress, or all naive at 19 and just entering the party scene. Some of the nicest civil human beings I've met were covered in tattoos, some of the nastiest, unhappy, and condescending belligerent masquerade as functional, respected members of the high life society when they're not completely inebriated. Story 17. I'm a nurse. When I was still a student doing clinicals at a big hospital in Lexington, I was sent to the burn unit. Didn't really expect much. Unit only had 4 beds. The nurse I was put with had another student from a different college that day as well. He said he didn't mind having 2 extra sets of helping hand. We go to meet our first patient of the day. He is a 50-ish-year-old white male who had been set on fire and burned over 90% of his body. The only parts of him that were not burnt were his face and his left forearm. Well, he was on continuous fluid drip of 1,000 mLs of, believe, normal saline every hour. so we had to take him to get bathed. We wheel him down the hall to an additional room they had for performing this bath. When we reach the doors, the nurse looks at me and the other student and says, "You don't have to stay in here for this, and I wouldn't think differently of you if you don't want to." We both kind of nod and say we are fine to stay. The nurse starts taking all of the leg and upper torso dressings off, everything except for the abdominal surgical dressing. He asks us to help him turn the patient over so he can spray down his back with a water rinsing wand that hung from the ceiling. When we turned him, I will never ever forget what we saw. The patient had been taken into surgery upon arrival to the hospital, and mechanical debridement had been used on his back to remove all of the burnt tissue. As soon as the other students saw this, he immediately started to look sick, like he was going to vomit, and ran for the door to go back onto the unit. I stood there in shock and just watched the rest of the bathing session. The nurse I was with never said a word about the other student leaving. Still the most ducked up thing I've seen in my 10-year career. Story 18 was monitoring door-kicking operations going on in Afghanistan. We were looking for a guy who was building IEDs and putting them outside schools that were teaching girls. A big no-no for the Taliban. We got a predator feed up, and we see a guy jump out of a window, Hollywood-style, dove through it headfirst, smashing the glass, everything. But unlike Hollywood, this was real life. He was bleeding badly. He falls down, but right as he hits the ground, boom, screens light up, and we hear a crap ton of profanities. There is like 10 seconds of silence before we hear this insane laughter. Then we hear, "Last name got hit with a junk, haha." Yeah, dude was wearing a vest, and he triggered it while he was falling. Blew his junk back through the window and right into the face of the first guy in the stack. Story 19. Two nurses ducking on a couch in a mostly abandoned break area on the surgical floor of a hospital. What was left of an apartment building that had not yet been cleared out in Kyiv after one of Russia's initial bombing runs. We were doing civilian extraction at a nearby hospital to get people the hell out of there. Our squad lead was smart enough to avoid that particular building on the way back out. What kind of NSF are you looking for? Story 20. My company's office had a secret room, an unmarked room hidden behind some paneling. I was showing some friends around the office, opened up the secret room to show it off, and interrupted a substances deal going down. Story 21. Used to deliver to Walmart's tire centers. Went to find the depth lead for a signature, and he had the female cashier bent over the break room table and duck her. Middle of the day, door unlocked, lights on, just going to pound town. Story 22. I was new at a restaurant. A guy had to clean the hood fans above the deep fryer. Guy covers 375-degree fryers with baking trays and is walking on top of them cleaning the vents. Of course, the trays aren't safe, and the guy's leg goes into the fryer up to his knee. Pants and socks are soaked in hot oil and sticking to his leg. He's screaming in agony while ripping his pants and socks off. Someone wraps his legs in paper towels until the ambulance arrives. It was wild, and I'll never forget it. Story 23. There's a lot as a former Uber driver in a big city. Guns, substances deals, tickle fights gone very wrong. But the most has to be a group sex situation going on in the back where there was defa BJ happening and dirty talk as well. Story 24. 1. A mom beating her daughter. 2. A guy pleasure himself and yelling, "I pay my insurance, I pay my bills, I can do it wherever I want." 3. Coworker and I were at this lady's house and she kept pulling her tits out. 4. Kid had tried to lost his parents and then revealed to me that he had a list with people who he wanted to hit. I then learned he lived right down the street from me. 5. There were these twin boys about age 6 who always had their pants halfway down their ass and were caked in poop. 6. I was meeting with a guy and he started pleasure himself and saying he wanted to have non-consensual sex with me. 7. There was a guy who would constantly talk about how all women want him, call himself a stallion, and brag about his 8-inch junk. This is quite sad. Parents were trying to arrange a marriage for their daughter to a grown man. Parents threatened to lost her if she did not go through with the marriage. The fiance's mother apparently tried to poison the girl because she wanted her son to be with someone better. The girl was blind. Story 25. My buddy, a cop, got a call on his radio to check out a car in a public parking lot. Someone had reported a couple having sex in the back seat. He got to the scene and saw they were really going at it big time. Turned out it was his dental hygienist. Story 26. Sexy Red Arena show. Tons of women into this. They were way too young. It was weird and gross, and afterwards the entire arena was covered in puke, squished lipstick, and tumbleweave. It was uncomfortable to work that gig. Story 27. When I ran a makerspace in a library, we had one of our more interesting clients show up with a jar of his own feces to show me the worms in it. I inflicted him on a homeopath in town. I felt they deserved each other. Story 28. I was in college, and that day our maths lecturer still hadn't shown up. As the class CR, everyone started looking at me. "Go check the teacher's room," someone said. "Maybe he forgot." I didn't think much of it, and walked down the quiet corridor. The teacher's room door was half closed. I knocked once, no answer. Thinking he might be inside, I gently pushed the door open, and then I froze. Our lecturer was there, but he wasn't alone. The history teacher was with him, standing way too close, half nude. They broke apart instantly, both clearly startled, faces flushed, fixing their clothes like they'd been caught doing something they definitely weren't supposed to be doing. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. The silence was unbearable. Sir, I stammered, staring at the floor. The class is waiting. He cleared his throat, avoided eye contact, and said he'd be there shortly. I nodded and left immediately, my heart racing. When I went back to class, everyone bombarded me with questions. Where is he? What took so long? All I said was, he's coming. But for the rest of my college life, every time I passed those teachers, that moment replayed in my head. Story 29. Walked in on my boss's boss, railing the district manager in the spare teleconferencing room, which sucked for me because that's where I hid and watched cat videos to avoid work. Story 30. Not my current job, but at a previous one I saw a few horrors, but and that really stands out to me is the time I saw and helped with a kid who'd hit himself with a fall. It was a blistering summer day. Kid's family was visiting my workplace and they were letting their kids climb on a bronze-casted statue out front. It was north of 1 and 10 and later in the day, so the statue was hot. Kid climbed up to the top, but he was drenched in sweat and his hands slipped. He fell. I was the manager on duty and rushed up front when I got a call of an injured kid and got a full and up-close view. I helped apply dressing and clean him up a bit. Parents refused to call an ambulance and insisted they drive him themselves, so I wrapped him up best I could, and off they went. Story 31. OB nurse here. Patient and her boyfriend having sex in the hospital room less than 12 hours after having their baby. Baby was in the room. Unfortunately, so was I. Story 32. I used to be a tree worker for Housing Trust, don't know what you'd call it in other countries, which is basically housing for people who can't afford a house in Australia. Many times I'd rock up to a house to cut trees and we were dragging tree brush through needles. Sometimes the needles would go through the chipper. Many times we would have to step over human crap and needles just to get the brush to the chipper. The children would be running barefoot around the yard with this all happening. The apartments were the worst. Ziploc bags with blood clots and needles stuffed into them. Met heads smoking up while we were working. I took photos and videos of a lot of things. I hope someone sees my post to realize the dark side of Australia. Story 33. My manager called me over to check out the new guy's car. He said he saw something crazy in it. It was a burnt, broken light bulb he had been using to smoke meth out of. Story 34. As a training director, we had some small breakout room. They had a peephole lens so you could see in. One day I walked by and the peephole was covered from the inside. After knocking and hearing a little scurry of activity, I used my office key to open the door. She had already covered up, but he was just letting it all hang out. He was later fired. Story 35. I used to work in dementia care. Me and a friend were doing the afternoon tea round handing out biscuits and hot drinks. We get to one lady who is already chewing and wiping her mouth and hands. I hear my friend say in a horrified voice, "What is that?" And the old dear says, "Oh, it's chocolate." We hadn't served this lady, and nor were we serving chocolate biscuits. Poor lady had done a poo in her trousers, had taken her underwear off at some point in the day, and it had fallen out her trousers leg and she'd picked it up and ate it like a chocolate bar. I can't tell you how much it traumatized me at the time. The thought that these people could, in theory, literally be served crap and happily eat it really messed with my head. And the gross factor of what happened caused both me and my friend to vomit. Very unpleasant. Story 36. Saw an accident outside our work's conference window, which faces a 70-mile-per-hour highway. There was a traffic jam due to construction with EMO, poorly placed warning merge signs, much too late. Regardless, we saw a sedan go flying at full speed into the back of a stopped school bus with no kids on board. The back right corner of the bus sliced the entire top half of the driver's side off, including the lady's skull. We ran out to check on it and saw everything. I drove home very slowly that day. Story 37. When I was 19, I worked at Jack in the Box as a manager. I was offered a handy for cheese sticks. I did not partake as I do not like jail. May have also get sex another manager there, who was 29. Fun times. Story 38. There was this gal from HR having relations in my cubicle a little after coworkers dipped. She was super crazy but hid it well. Think Wednesday in terms of composure. She was called the mute because she rarely engaged in conversation but heard everything. She knew too much about everyone in the office. I didn't care. It was a temp job until I could get what I wanted. She knew I was down, and I knew it was a temp job pogo stick for her. Win-win in my book because she was out of her mind wild, but I didn't need to worry about a crazy girl relationship or getting sent to HR. Story 39. I worked at a gym as a teenager. Best job ever. Highly recommend. I have many NSFW experiences from the handful of years I was there. A lot of over-the-top personalities, police, fire, steroids, housewives, and cheaters, railroad workers. The first that comes to mind was having to call the police because a scummy couple had planned for the girl to sneak photos of specific other women in the locker room to share with his buddies. She got caught and subdued by one of the largest and strongest women I've even heard of, who held her down while nude until the police arrived. Story 40, a guy we worked with, married, was having an affair with another woman at the office. Neither were particularly tech-savvy. The guy, we'll call him Eric, used a USB cable from his PC to charge his phone. Somehow, and I don't think it was on purpose, he downloaded a bunch of his photos to his PC. One day, Eric was having PC issues, so the IT tech, we'll call him Robert, was remoted into his PC. He found the folder with pics, which were of Eric with his whipped cream covered, and the other coworker, we'll call her Mindy, in some lacy lingerie licking the whipped cream off. Robert only showed a couple of us what he found because he didn't know if it should be reported. We told him to delete the folder from the PC and never speak of it again. So that, story 41, I work for a power generation company. There was a picture circulating that one of our technicians took at a job site of a copper thief that tried to cut into a live high-voltage power line with chain cutters with no insulation on the handles. The current was so strong it literally hit the guy, and he passed. The grounding never tripped the breaker, so he sat there cooking for some time before the utility switched over to another line. Story 42. I was a project manager. My lead engineer was going through a difficult divorce and met his soon-to-be ex at a rental house they owned on Saturday. He hit and she passed, called her parents 2 hours away to come get their 2 kids, and then came into work and hid himself in his office. Worst thing I ever experienced at work, but at least I didn't physically see it. Story 43. At my first job, I was told by a supervisor one night to make sure the 2 other cashiers stayed at their registers except to take a break separately. I had no authority and was newer than them by several years. It turns out, the previous night they were caught by a customer having sex in the break room, and they still worked there for years to come. Story 44. I had a guy call in and ask if we could make a junk-shaped pizza for a party. I have no idea if it was genuine or not, but I was kind of sad. My manager was pissed just at the suggestion. Story 45. 2 things. A coworker had a 50th birthday and the boss hired a stripper to come to the shop. We were in the parts room when she did her act. Nice-looking lady? I never thought I would see it in our parts room. Many years earlier, I was working when I heard "oh" and a coworker ran toward me and collapsed. Our first aid man ran over and pulled his pants down. I saw a deep gash an inch above his junk. A grinding disc had exploded. This was the worst injury I'd seen. Story 46. My head hurts, and brushed his scalp back onto his skull like he was patting down his hair. Needless to say, he was in shock. Walked into the ER a few days later complaining of a headache. They gave him paperwork to fill out, and he stroked out in the waiting room. He passes before they found him. Story 47. Worked at a large warehouse. We had trucks in the yard 24/7. Eventually, lot lizards started hanging out in our lot. We saw them wash off in puddles of rainwater, and I had to sit in HR as a union steward for a dude who, on the clock, knowing cameras are everywhere, accepted a $5 BJ deal. Thankfully, HR didn't make us watch the whole video, just enough to show they had the proof they needed to legally terminate the employee. After that incident, they fenced the lot so nobody could come in or out without checking in at the gate. Story 48. I didn't personally see it, but a coworker at my first office job filmed POV sex with his fiancée and basically jump-scared a couple of the young women we worked with the video. Story 49. I worked on a new construction project that was part of an expansion of a fancy hotel in downtown Calgary. Every morning for a week, a woman would do yoga naked on her balcony, directly across from the roofline of the building I was working on. It was like clockwork. You could tell she was out there, because at 10 a.m. it would grow very quiet, and anyone who was up on the roof would basically drop what they doing and gather to watch the show. Story 50. This happened while I was bartending on a busy Saturday night. A drunkish woman, standing at the bar right in front of me, reached under her miniskirt and pulled off her thong. Drunk man who was talking to her, trying to pick her up, took the thong from her. This wasn't a dive bar either. It was a pretty nice place. They were asked to leave shortly after. He ended up coming in for brunch the following day and crap his pants. I quit soon after. Wonder if he was finally banned. Story 51. My office is at a library in a downtown area next to a park known for its issues. I've seen several shootings, DV, and a guy doing substances in the courtyard outside the conference room window where we were having a meeting. Story 52. Coworker at a Ruby. Tuesdays thought it was funny to duck people in random spots. You go into the walking for some pasta. There he is, bent over junk and balls tucked behind his legs. I asked him multiple times to not. He refused. One day I happened to have a Sani towel for a mess I made and walked in. There he was. I had the only reasonable response and towel snapped him in the junk. Not soft either. I was fresh out of the high school locker room, so my technique was immaculate. Story 53. A worker trapped in a concrete pipe press who passed in front of his family when the mold was released. A lover's triangle gone bad, where the husband brought a shotgun out. The good days were amazing. The bad days were nightmare fuel. Story 54. I work in K-12 it. I'm absolutely beyond done with the amount of corn I'm subjected to on colleagues' personal phones. I learned pretty quick to never glance at any cell phone screen while passing through. So many people are actively watching adult content, sharing adult content, or just sexting on the clock. Most school districts require all staff accounts to have MFA enabled, so I'm stuck dealing with people's personal phones that they don't charge, don't keep updated, and they obviously don't close out of browser tabs with active corn, nor delete messages with images. Story 55. At my first job, we had like one computer in the break area. Every morning while we were drinking coffee, a coworker would get on Craigslist and look at all the junk pics on the men meeting men section when they used to have it. The boss didn't even care either. It was weird. Thinking back on it, the dude looked a lot like Jeffrey Epstein too. He was an odd dude. Story 56. I work in a hotel, and the amount of public nudity and sex in public areas is crazy. We had a guest who was walking up outside stairs and got peed on by a woman who left her room, walked to the stairs and squatted let loose. And since the stairs have gaps, anyone underneath her on the other floors got hit. She went back to her room like it was nothing. We had her on security camera, and this wasn't late at night. It was like 2 in the afternoon. Story 57. Not strictly me, but some tales from the commercial fishing fleet a few years ago in the boatyard. Before the season had even started, a greenhorn crewman got caught ducking his captain's wife. He was fired and then immediately hired by a much better boat with a very generous contract. Story 58. Former coworker gets fired and then has a meltdown. Posts on social media showing substances and alcohol abuse. Got kicked out of his apartment, clearly filming clips from hotel rooms, inviting everyone to hotel parties while brandishing a gun. His family finally convinced him to check into detox, where he instead steals an ambulance and drives it to our work site, where he was immediately arrested. Work had to hire security for our site, just in case it happened again. Story 59. I haven't seen much in the way of NSFW stuff at my jobs, but 2 instances stand out. One was a chill retail job where a guy liked watching stuff during his free time. He laughed at most of the stuff and showed me a video of someone hit their brains. He laughed during that part. Second was I delivered pizza to a hotel to people who were clearly just paused or just finished having sex. Story 60. A line of crap, roughly 4 feet off the ground on all 4 walls, and the door to McDonald's bathroom when I worked there in high school. It looked like they grabbed their ankles and did a 360. Thing is, it wasn't a smear. It was mostly liquid and had ran down the walls. Story 61. Working as a pizza delivery guy. Delivered a pizza to a hotel. When I knocked on the door, a woman opened up with no clothes on, just standing there with all her wonderful curves. She offered me BJ in exchange for the pizza for free. Didn't do it because I was at the time nervous and in shock. So she reluctantly paid and I told my boss. He said, next time, call him and the order be canceled, and the pizza and girl be free. Story 62. Guy named Bruce spread his crap all over the walls and mirror of a public bathroom that I cleaned while I worked in public works. How do I know the guy was named Bruce, you ask? He signed his work. Story 63. Not at my job, but in my school. I was the editor of my school media board. So there was this time I had to rush and edit. One of my teacher told to do stuff in ChatGPT and gave her phone. Me and friend were in charge of it. We had to use Chrome. We had to open the history to check something. When we stumbled across almost 100 histories of adult film, we were traumatized for days. Story 64. I clean cars and I've compiled a list of things I've seen in people's cars: guns, bullets, substances, used nappies, diarrhea, animals, used underwear, sex toys, new and used, needles used, rotten food, rotten vomit, moldy feces, baseball bats, machetes, adult film, tampons and pads, new and used, dried mucus stains. Story 65. I used to work in a warehouse that shipped out sex toys. Someone was stealing sex toys. That one isn't too bad. Someone put razor blades in the bathroom, like right on top of the toilet seat, and just left them there, almost as if hoping someone would cut their ass on a blade. Someone pleasure on the toilet constantly. Management told us to clean it. I absolutely refused. Story 66. A few years ago, a guy hit his stepmother and filmed it and put it on Snapchat. A guy I worked with knew someone who knew him and showed us the Snapchat of this woman lying past. Next day, saw the story and blurred video all across the news. That was kind of wild. Story 67. Worked in a greenhouse right out of high school. We would load flower pots onto this giant metal carts. Fully loaded would be anywhere from 500 to 1,300 pounds. One started rolling down a slight grade, and this guy tried to stop it, but it kept going and went next to other carts lined up. This guy's hand got really hit. It's still top 3 worst things I've ever seen. Story 68. Was assisting a customer and they were showing me a screenshot of some information I needed. I went to tap the screen as it went dark. Well, it swiped when I tapped the screen and bro had a screenshot of a half-naked adult star. I felt my face go bright red. Story 69. New York colleague in the Army end. He's life when I was working with him. His GF broke up with him and he just took out his 9mm meat and hit himself. He is the 5th man I have known the past 10 years that passed that way. But we never talk about the issue about men's mental health. Story 70, a naked woman. I worked at a call center and one of the women on my row was a Wiccan priestess. For whatever ceremony she was preparing for, she had to remain naked for a few days before it. Apparently, it was cleared by HR that she could come to work with just a blanket around her. Story 71. I worked in an office job. We had back-to-back cubicles. This younger, good-looking girl one day had her thong hanging out the back to her pants and a lower-cut shirt. This older guy was discussing, questioning her, and he starts to get a pleasure himself. Story 72. Guy with bilateral compound fractures of the lower legs, freaking out because he had a paradoxical reaction to the ketamine meant to knock his ass out. So, legs flailing. Apparently, he had had an argument with his girlfriend and went to leave. She stood in front of the door and said, "The only way you leave is off the balcony." Guess what happened next? Story 73. This girl I used to work with was very liberal. Don't know how to better phrase it, but one time we were at an office BBQ for Canada Day and she showed all of us a video of her BJ. Her ex-boyfriend, we had hog dogs and burgers. It was a fun day. Story 74. Not current job, lifeguarding. People got very intimate when they thought nobody could see them. Please do not insert any part of your body into any part of anyone else's body while you're in the hot tub. Story 75. I worked at Wendy's, and someone took a crap on a paper plate, stuck a fork in it, and left it on top of the toilet. We did not have paper plates. Story 76. Ducked an actress on the break room table at an off-Broadway live theater after the plays were finished. Nudists in the drive-thru when I worked at Taco Bell. Violent crafting after a one-chip challenge gone wrong at the office. Story 77. The head of HR was in her 50s, would lock her door, and give me shoulder massages, then threatened to fire me. It was really ducked up. Same hospital, we had sex toy stuck to bike helmets and we would throw glow necklace at each other after hours. What's the most unprofessional thing you've ever done while on the clock? Story 1. A friend of mine, now gone rip, and I worked at an amusement park in Sweden. Once every week, we had to clean the slush machines thoroughly, and we would volunteer to work together. There were 5 flavors and 2 dispensers of each, 10 dispensers in total. What we would do was that one of us would sneak in alcohol and connect it to one of the dispensers and leave it to freeze while we were cleaning the rest. At the end, we would take some slush bottles and empty the slush with alcohol, clean the boozed up dispenser to the point of it being sterilized, leave the park and sit somewhere getting wasted and listening to our favorite music, mostly Metallica. Story 2. Used to have a job in a huge record center building, back in the day when this meant a million file cabinet. They were anticipating progress and started us microfilming files. Very shortly, they realized that maybe they should go digital instead, so they got rid of everyone but me. My only job was to answer the phone if someone somewhere wanted a file, then see if I could find it, copy it, and send that out in the mail next day. I usually got 2 or 3 calls a week. Also, the place was creepy, so I would sleep for the whole time except when the mailman showed up, or bring in my guitar and amp and play. Great fun. Story 3. Late one night in a warehouse I used to work in, me and 2 other coworkers jousted with long cardboard tubes while riding a forklift and what essentially was a golf cart. OSHA would definitely say it wasn't safe for work. Story 4. I simply skipped every other day of work but counted my hours as if I went every day. I used to have a job collecting recyclable medical devices from hospitals all around my city. I didn't have to show up to an office. I just left home to the first hospital. I clocked in with a phone, scanned barcodes at each hospital, and on each collection point to verify I was there and check the container, put them in FedEx boxes, and scan the label to indicate it shipped. I only had to collect and ship containers that were 75% full, or take a photo of it to show it was less than that. I quickly figured out the management who received the reports the app generated had no ducking clue how the software worked, and it surely did understand, but gave absolutely no ducks. The app recorded the date, time, and GPS coordinates when you scanned a barcode, but the field it entered this info into was editable. It also lets you choose pics from the phone instead of taking them in real time. I'm sure it could see that pictures were selected instead of taken, and the GPS coordinates were typed and not scanned, But that info didn't print out on the report that went to my manager. Only the info in the fields. So my manager didn't see it, and again, it gave no ducks about that sort of thing. Not their job. It was a full-time job, but I only did it every other day. I took tons of pictures of the collection containers with less than 75% contents, and I wrote down the coordinates of each barcode. I also took pictures of the barcodes on my personal phone. I would go do the actual job, but I would collect every container no matter how full it was, pack the FedEx boxes, but only ship half of them. I'd use the pics of not full containers for half of them in the app and hang on to the full FedEx boxes I didn't ship. The next day, I would just stay home, scan all the barcodes I'd taken pictures of, enter the date and plausible times, paste the GPS coordinates I'd written down, scan the FedEx boxes I'd kept from the previous day. I didn't have to take the FedEx boxes to FedEx. I just had to give them to the hospital's shipping receiving department. So if the date I scanned the label didn't match the tracking number, I could plausibly say, I gave it to the hospital on that date, when they actually shipped it is out of my hands. I'd just give it to the hospital on the next day I actually did the job. Yeah, only doing it every other time made a lot of containers overflow, but since I always collected everything, even if it was less than 75%, it kind of evened out. And hey, if anyone complained, I could say, man, they must be really generating a ton of these things to be overflowing every day. I know someone will say that what I was doing left a trail and I could have gotten caught, and I'm sure that's true, but I worked there for several years, quit for a better job, and no one ever said anything to me about it. Story 5, Boot Camp. Fort Benning, can't remember what it is called now, had found an access ladder to the roof in a closet next to a water heater. It was a Sunday. Cleaning and church service usually is what primarily goes on during Sundays, and I guess people even get their cell phones now too. Wild to me. Anyway, I started taking small breaks on that roof on Sundays instead of cleaning, usually the length of a church service, so people would assume that's where I was. I'm not religious. One Sunday, I ended up falling asleep on the roof, woke up 4-ish hours later, had missed both chow and formation, knew they were probably doing their after-chow PT. This was usually unsupervised as well. We just had to knock out a certain number of push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups after dinner, hurried across one of the other platoon's concrete areas to find my platoon. We were not allowed to cut across these. We were supposed to go around on the sidewalks. Got caught by a drill sergeant. Got put into front-leaning rest. He told me not to move and walked away. I realized he hadn't got my name and I was in PTS with no name tag, assuming he thought I was one of his. With my life flashing before my eyes, I was still 17. After a few minutes, I decided to book it when he went inside to call someone about me or something. Made it back to my platoon, assuming they thought I was at a church service or something when they took roll call. Shockingly, I was never missed and never got in trouble. I also never went back on that damn roof. Or we took the Humvees mudding at my unit. They told several of us, low ranks, to go do a long PMCS all day with older vehicles because some brass was coming for inspection. Buried those damn things so deep. Story 6. I worked for a cell phone company in a city of about 50K, but after they fired me the first time, they asked me to come back with the caveat that I would have to work in the office that was about 20 minutes away in a very small town. This turned out to be a goldmine for me, as the competitor carrier got caught with their tower powered up way too hot and had to disable it, which opened the floodgates for me as sales went through the roof. I would shamelessly put a sign on the door that I was gone to bank, be right back, but would sit in the back room where I could use a mirror to see the front door so that I could profile customers and decide whether or not I wanted to talk to them. If I did, I would come trotting to the door to unlock it and let them in with a greeting of, "Perfect timing, I just walked back in." That was when I discovered Sparks caffeinated, as the Walmart next door never ID'd 18-year-old me. It sure made the day go by a lot quicker. Story 7. I would dab in the freezers at work or the cooler or my boss's office when they were gone, or really anywhere on the clock. Oh, and bait in the back room. Story 8. I was a receptionist at a community center. Came in careening because we take on the excess Muslim from the local mosque for Friday prayers. They pay for the room, are courteous people, and generally lovely. This guy spends about 20 minutes arguing with the manager and myself that we're basically abusers because all Muslims are like that. I eventually got overwhelmed by the whole thing and just told him to go duck himself and that I'd trust my sister with the local Muslims instead of him because I knew he was on several substances and had a conviction for domestic violence. Manager scolds me afterwards about unprofessionalism, but basically said afterwards, he deserved it, but try not to do it at the desk. Go outside and curse him out next time. Story 9. Had a bit of a mental breakdown back in early 22 and was working from home full-time in a senior ET role for local government. During a Zoom meeting with my camera off, obviously, I was alternating between hitting huge pipes met The smoking went on for 6 months before I snapped out of it and got my life straight, just in time to get bagged by the old bill for a crime I committed under the influence months earlier. And I ended up going to prison for 2 years. Which reminds me, back in 2020, I got taken into custody and held on remand, but got out after 5 days on appeal. Rang my team leader when I got out and apologized for not logging on remotely for the week as I was in bullying Don Nick. No one had noticed, so he kept it secret and no one ever found out. He was a really nice guy. Story 10. Was working at a house that was across right next to my ex's place. I wasn't sure if it was her place or not, because I hadn't seen the house from that side before, and it was a little far away. I told her to look out her bedroom window to confirm if it was. Then she popped her head out the window and told me to come over. Story 11. I used to have the nickname The Long Drop in my early 20s at my first real serious job. Think white-collar, central city of London office, financial services with a suit and tie. I used to find toilets around the office building and see how high I could take a crap from and still land in the middle of the toilet. I used to share these videos with a select group of my peers who would often go scouting for different toilets across either that multi-story building or other ones nearby. I would dedicate over an hour on multiple days a week to this quest. For anyone foolish enough to want to know the answer, I found a very old church with a public toilet and vaulted ceilings in the middle of the city of London. I managed about a 15-foot drop and almost broke my leg getting down off the rafters. Story 12. This was well before good cameras and detailed transaction histories. I worked for a very well-known convenience store chain, and I got really good at memorizing prices and frequently combined items to the point where I could no-sale a transaction and give them their change while pocketing the cost of the items, easily taking home an extra $50 or $100 about 4 bags a week for a few months before a quarterly audit flagged that something fishy was going down. Never got caught because they believed a different long-term employee who had quit without notice had done the deed. The summer of freeweed. Story 13. I used to keep a bottle of Jim Beam in my office at a previous job. I never got drunk on the clock, but sometimes I would pour a drink if I was working late. One night, a coworker came in to ask me for help with something, and I totally forgot to hide the glass before letting her in. I know she saw it, but it was not mentioned. A few weeks later, she ended up getting a RIF notice. Shortly after that, my boss asked me for a key to my office to look for something. I gave it to him, but didn't go with him. I stayed on the floor fixing whatever was wrong. He stopped by later, gave it back, and neither one of us said a word about what he was looking for. I am 100% positive that ratted me out when she got terminated. I suspected I shouldn't trust her seeing the glass on my desk, so I took that crap home that night. Story 14. Pallet jack scooter races. Told my new manager, yelling at us, while zooming past, "Been riding on these longer than you've worked here, bro, see you?" Called into HR meeting. Didn't get fired. Worked there 7 more years, and long after said manager got canned. See you, story 15. I used to work as a security guard for a large car factory via a company that wasn't associated with the car company that ran the factory. To get around the factory, roughly the size of 2 football stadiums put together, we had this yellow flatbed cart that could seat 4. Every Christmas, the whole plant would close for 2 weeks. U.S. guards would be the only ones on the property. One Christmas, one of my coworkers took our cart to the maintenance garage and modified it. So now instead of doing its usual 7 mpr slow crawl around the plant, it would easily push 45 mpr on a full charge. It was the most fun I've ever had getting paid. We took the thing off of ramps, learned how to do drifts around corners, and did figure eights around all the machines inside. And since we controlled all of the cameras, no one would know. Story 16. Throwing sand across the polished concrete floors so you could drift the forklift. Substances, there was plenty of that. Drinking. Making little brass cannons in the metal lathe. Spray painting our cars in the spray booth that wasn't for cars. Sleeping in the server room on late night shifts because it had the nicest temp. Sleeping on the sofa in the office because it was in the city, and after a big night out, it meant you didn't need to try get home while wasted. Taking all kinds of hardware home, server racks, switches. The company I worked for was directly involved in the hotels, pubs, and clubs industry, and things just seemed to get loose a lot, and no one ever seemed bothered by it all. The owner loved the eat department, as we made him lots of money, so we never really got questioned. Joys of family-owned businesses. Story 17. Back in 1991, I was 15 and worked at a supermarket on register. When someone wanted a pack or carton of cigarettes, I would ring them up with a code, and it would print out a slip for them to go to customer service and get them. A few times a day, customers would be handed the carton and told to ring them up at checkout. I would enter the code instead of scanning. Then I would not give them the pickup slip. I kept it and called a friend on break to come get us free smokes. At a different supermarket that sold beer, we would buy a case of soda and go dump it out in someone's car. Then bring in the empty case folded up, fill it with beer, tape it back up, and check out at a friend's register. The store still made some money. and we got beer. Story 18, two come to mind. Same job, was a security guard on the night shift back in my university days. Had sex with one of the nurses, and to this day, she gave me the straightest line I have ever encountered. I bought a new bra, want to see? We also had a key to the morgue and had to accompany the staff with the stiffs. Scared the begives out of my colleague by suddenly jumping out from the stretcher and from under the sheet. When I was a lawyer at a high-profile law firm and was showing clients a good time, got drunk. We were in a high-end escort house. Got myself 2 escorts and charged it to the law firm. Story 19. One of my first jobs was event security. I got assigned to my first solo job. Product watch on some multi-day cartoon show on ice. They'd leave the stands up with merch overnight rather than break down and set up every time. The venue was on a college campus. Some college girls in the dorms that overlooked the venue convinced me to come up and act as security for their keg at the party they were throwing. Convincing was flashing me and giving me a beer and promising I'd see more titties. They put up a sign near the keg that said "Flash for beer." I spent 3 hours basically been shown tits non-stop, freaked out and went back to my position. My boss showed up a half hour later just doing a check-in on his way home from another event. Story 20. Back 20-ish years ago when I, male, was interning, there was another intern, female, that worked with me. One night towards the end of the shift when no one else was around our cubicles, she decided to change into her gym clothes. She told me she was going to do this, and she got into a hidden space where no one can see her. She finished changing, and I think she tried dropping hints beforehand that she wanted me to see, but I was dense. Anyhow, she walked over to me after and asked me directly if I would dare her to flash me. So I played along and she flashed me. Nothing else ever happened between us because I had a girlfriend at the time, and I basically told this intern. I think she was disappointed, but we were still cool about things afterward. Story 21. I worked at Rooms to go in my early 20s and was going out super late every night partying, then would pretend to take a dump in the back stall and sleep for a bit during the early hours before opening. Apparently, I had a doozy and slept 2 hours and missed the intercom calls for me. I was snoring and a customer told someone. My manager came kicking the stall door in, all purple-faced and screaming. I was shook and tried to jump up and fell into him and back onto the toilet. This fool then fired me with my pants down sitting on the toilet. He got fired years later for falling asleep at the store after hours and sleeping on a bed. I was told he had been drinking on the job the whole time. Story 22. Was asked to store some paperwork in our supplies and storage cage in the warehouse. After bringing it over, we realized the only real space available was on the top rack that was about 30 feet in the air. We had a forklift, but the cage was so tight we couldn't turn it to put a pallet onto the rack. So the amazingly unsafe idea of me standing on the forks being raised up and hand placing the boxes of papers on the rack was executed. A slightly smarter idea would have been to put a pallet on the forks and stand on that, but I was confident in my balance. If anyone would have found us, we'd probably both have been fired on the spot. But we got it done, and no one got hurt. Another day working for the government. Story 23. 20 plus years ago, I worked at a department store. I was a signer. My entire job was making sure all the signs on the women's side were correct. The holidays are daring, and I see that my starting shift is now 5 a.m. instead of 7 a.m., and I'm expected to come back from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. for the next 2 weeks, doing things I didn't hire in for. Tell my boss, I'm not doing any of that. I'm a college student with 2 jobs. She tells me I can get with the program or be fired. So a few days later, I print all of the signs from the system and the garbage. Got some really angry voicemails and never went back. Story 24. I worked for myself, so who's really going to fire me? But back when I was a logger, I'd put down a 12-pack of beers every day while cutting trees. Probably played a factor in why I got hurt so often, but it was light beer, so my justification was it's mostly water, electrolytes, and carbs to replace all of the crap I was sweating out and burning off. Then, if get off work, go shower, take an hour nap, and meet up with my friends to drink some more until like 2 or 3 a.m., then sleep and get back at the same crap at 6. Yeah, now that I actually type it out, it certainly was my own fault. I got hurt so much. Story 25. In college, I would work Thursday night 2 p to 10 p in a warehouse. Thursday nights were also a big bar night in the town, and all my friends would go out. So instead of coming home and showering and going to prepare for my 7:45 chemistry class, I'd bring a flask of tequila to work and started pre-gaming at 9:45 so I could drive home from work before I started to feel the booze and still be ready to party by the time I got to the bars. Not proud of it, just something stupid I did when I was in the party stage of my life. Thankfully, I've grown up a lot and these sorts of things do happen anymore. Story 26. I wasn't on the clock, but the girl was. One visited a store and got what I needed, plus her number. Made plans to get coffee after she clocked off. Instead, she invited me back as she closed down. Did her in the back room and again on the desk out front. Was kind of wild watching people walk by in the strip mall while we were going at it. She clocked off and then we got coffee. 2GF worked overnights at a hotel. Plenty of fun was had in various rooms, just around the corner of the lobby, breakfast prep room, etc. I always laughed to myself, as she'd greet people who just walked in while we were occupied. Story 27. Hit up my Coke plug to come through to the restaurant I was working at. I was in the kitchen, naturally. Walked off the line, out the front door, drove to the bank to get $100 out of the ATM, drove back, walked back in, and started working again. Went right back out to make the exchange when he got there. Sundays were pretty chill. Story 28. I worked at HQ, which was like Home Depot, but green instead of orange. I was hired for lawn and garden, but they kept telling me to go to lumber. No one in lumber wanted to show me what to do and kept telling me to just walk around. Walking around turned into walking across the street to talk to my friends at their jobs, which turned into just clocking in and then leaving to go do whatever. The store ended up going out of business and no one ever said a word to me. Story 29. I ripped out a gear shaft without any safety precautions because I got tired of the rest of people walking in circles wondering what to do. I also detached myself from my harness's safety point once when we were installing an antenna because no one could reach it otherwise. OSHA would scream at me if they ever saw me at work. I've done these things again and again during my career, and I'm somehow still alive. Not that I care about living to begin with. Story 30. I'm pretty straight arrow. I don't break too many rules. I let my employees swim in our penthouse pool, even though that was against the rules. You had to live there to swim there. I did as part of my job there, so I would sign them in as my guest and go eat lunch during that time so they could use the pool or sauna and whatever if they wanted. I was either conveniently not working or busy at another property or elsewhere in the building if asked about it by any residents. I'd say, oh, you mean my cousin's sister, college roommate? They're just visiting. Story 31. Had a vasectomy and later had to return a specimen to make sure I was clear of swimmers. Problem was, my appointment to deliver the said specimen was during my work hours. Told my manager the situation and that I wasn't sure where to collect the specimen as I didn't want to get caught in my car. She told me not to worry about it. Told me to crank one out in the employee-only bathroom and then leave to deliver the specimen. I guess it was okay because I had manager approval. Story 32. I worked for a large-ish bread production company based in Clackamas, Oregon. If you know, we used to do power jack races where you would sit in an office chair and put your legs up on the power jack and away you went. Like a pod racer around the warehouse. And we also used to have nights where the bakery would shut down for cleaning so the depot had nothing to do. So we'd have impromptu BBQs at 12 a.m., run to Winco, get some food and drinks. It was a lot of fun, had some great times. Horrible, unsafe, though pretty much OSHA's wet dream. Story 33. There was an add-on to the main building that had a separate entrance. It has rows of old files with a door at the end that led to the boss's private duck room. But that's a story for another day. I used to go look for files that I knew couldn't be there as part of my due diligence when they'd send me for them. Snuck 3 coworkers in there to help me look, struck out with one. I was in high school and it never occurred to me that they might be upset when they found out about each other. Story 34. Fired a 50 black powder gun down the warehouse aisle into a cinder block basement wall. Boss came running downstairs to see what happened. By then the gun was stashed. Smoke was everywhere. We were just starting there, holding our ears. He screamed, "What the hell was that?" We, 4 employees, just acted like we had no idea what happened. Our ears were ringing, but inside we were all laughing our asses off. Life in a gun warehouse in the 70s. Story 35. I'm not even sure the most unprofessional thing I did, but I accidentally got a bunch of people addicted to caffeine citrate after giving them Haribo gummy bears covered in it. They knew. That was the whole point. It kind of became a problem when I'd get a line of people, including some managers, wanting bears at 2 p.m. One thing about caffeine citrate is that it hits almost immediately. So there's a massive instantaneous dopamine rush that you don't get with regular caffeine. But holy hell does it wake you up. It's illegal now. I think it was illegal then too. Story 36. Most? That's tough. It'd probably either be working a second job simultaneously or getting a BJ during a meeting. Not a video meeting though. There was also a time where I was unfireable. So I'd stroll into work at 10:30, go to lunch at noon, come back around 2 and leave at 4. And still put that I worked 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. My work was always caught up, so they couldn't really say anything. But most of the office hated that I got away with it for 2 years. Story 37. I've worked in so many fast food joints, I've lost count. No matter which one I worked at, their prices were a ripoff and their profit margins were astronomical. When the bosses weren't looking, I'd give more than what people paid for, and then some. Or even give stuff away for free. We're talking hundreds of dollars worth of meals. And not feel one bit of guilt, because it felt fair, it felt right. Like I was balancing out the playing field. Unprofessional? I'd do it again without hesitation. Story 38. I had a summer job in college as a janitor in one of the dorms. It was a very easy job, and we were only busy maybe half the time anyway. One Friday, we knew we had nothing to do, so I bet my coworker that I could hide from him the entire afternoon, so he and the other 2 students spent 4 hours looking for me when I went home and took a nap, only to come back to clock out later. So not only did I get paid to take a nap, I won a $20 bet too. Story 39. Years ago, I did security work for one of the biggest banks in my country. Every night, we would do rounds around the HQ office to see everything is fine. Every night during the round, I would go to the office of the president of the bank and take a huge, long crap in his private bathroom. Story 40. When I was in high school, I worked at a local furniture store during the summers. It would often get quiet during weekdays. Being a teenager, I'd usually stay up very late playing video games, and I'd be exhausted during the day. Sometimes I'd be lucky enough to have to go out to the warehouse to organize, and I'd find a tucked away spot on mattress racks and fall asleep for an hour at most. Always wondered if I ever got caught, because since then I've had partners tell me I snore on my back. Story 41. I work for the fire department, so we have a lot of free time at work. I've seen everything from guys rebuilding truck engines to selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace to having full-on firehouse lunch dates with Tinder women. Personally, I use the winter months to restore friends snowboarding in our station's workshop. It's a great place to make extra money while also making a paycheck at the same time. Oh, we had a guy try to grow his own tobacco behind the station. It did not go well. Story 42. When I was in college, I worked at KB Toys. I smoked next to the cardboard compressor basically every shift and just spent hours playing with little remote control cars and showing kids toys. We were allowed to open anything to demo for a customer, and let's just say I opened a lot of toys for kids. I was also sleeping with an assistant manager, another associate, and then started dating the store manager's daughter all around the same time. It was a fun job, but also more degenerate than I think most people realized. Story 43. Met my fiance at work. We would book meeting rooms to duck. We would go to the car park, and she'd do BJ. We were in connected departments, so we would always end up on jobs together, to the point that they were going to book us hotels together. We then moved in together and used to bone while in Teams meetings. Cam and Mike off. Story 44. My last year in landscape construction, I clocked in and out at home every day. We were supposed to do it at the job site, but I was so mentally checked out on the industry that I didn't care anymore. I was clocking roughly 5 extra hours every pay period. I kept waiting for someone to pull me into a meeting or tell me to stop, but nobody ever did. By the end of the season, the company had paid me something like 80 hours to just drive to and from my house. Story 45. Receptionist at a very small company was pretty and flirty. Office closed for an hour for lunch every day. There was one other employee that always left for lunch. One day, the flirting turned into a dare, and we ducked on my desk, then hers. She'd come into my office while I was on the phone and do BJ. I'd hid under her desk and return the favor. We ducked daily and in every possible place in that building. We also dated outside the office. Best job ever. Story 46. Years ago, I worked in an auto parts store. Quiet day, hardly any customers, so one of the guys showed us how to make sparkler bombs. Once he finished his one, he lit his and threw it just outside the loading bay. The explosion was way stronger than we expected. It shocked the building, and most of us had ringing in our ears. Those were the days. Story 47. It wasn't my work, but my ex's. She was a waitress at a bar, and it was slow late in the night, so we went into the bathroom and ducked for quite a while. Definitely surprised nobody came in during that time. We were in one of the stalls of the women's bathroom. A few weeks later, the bartender couple found out and were super pissed at us because we beat them to it. They had plenty of opportunities because they regularly closed the bar together. Story 48. Had sex several times, jobs, and females. Even though I threatened to spank her drunken ass if she didn't get out of my kitchen, and she had pulled her pants down, I didn't. That was in her opinion. Unprofessional. A chef should use his spatula when asked. The regular was just joking, of course, and I thought she was just a bit tipsy, but she turned out to be drunk. Story 49. Worked at a video game store inside of a Hollywood video. Everyone was stealing from corporate managers down. This is when Xbox 360 was out and having the red ring of death. So when my Xbox I bought legitimately broke, I just went in the back and swapped it with another one. Story 50. Worked Tier 1 it for a school district, literally 5 min from my house. Multiple buildings I could theoretically be at. I could view tickets via an app on my phone. If it wasn't testing season or beginning end of semester, there wasn't a ton going on. I'd go home and play video games until I got a ticket. Sometimes I'd sleep until 10 or 11, then tell our department assistant I'd forgot to clock in. She'd fix my timesheet for me. Story 51. Slept. Pleasure stole. Destroyed property. Left to go shopping. Home. Had barbecues with friends. breaking and entering, framed bosses getting them fired, raid employee files, confidential memos, board of directors meeting notes, sabotage, shot off guns and M80s, bottle rocket fights with friends, metal detected the property digging up coins and jewelry and other goodies dating back to the 1800s, you name it. I probably did it while working as a night watchman for nearly 3 decades, and I got away with it all. Good Times Story 52, drank a few beers at home while watching a football game, was on a 7-day consecutive call during my geriatrics rotation, then got called by a nurse to see a patient for something, ordered a CT scan just to stall long enough to make sure I was sober, then drove to the hospital to see the patient. Story 53, I used to stay up late as a teenager during the summer playing FIFA. This one guy I played with was always online from like midnight to 8 a.m. Turns out he was a hotel security guard during the night shift and would just sit at the desk with screens displaying the cameras. Never really did anything, so he brought his PlayStation to work and used one of the spare TV monitors to game all night. Story 54. Me and the other engineers would weigh ourselves, estimate how many beers each of us could have, and still be under the legal driving limit before returning to work. 6 blocks away, we would eat on the company card as team building, and the guy who blew over limit would pay for the drinks. It was always Shane. Shane was an alcoholic. Story 55. When I was 20, I was hauling truckloads of road base, and we had to load our own trucks. Had a pistol range at the pit. We would get done loading and fire off a cylinder of rounds and then go haul our loads until we got caught by the supervisor. Got called into the office and was told, leave your guns at home. Story 56. Not me, but an ex of mine used to be the manager of a well-known chain of baked potato fast food joint. Back when I was at college, I used to go down to see her, and we would go duck in the manager's office. Then she would go serve me up a free baked potato afterwards. Story 57. I pleasure in the bathroom before, but IDK if it would be that. Or when I would mix up a quarter or half pint of whiskey into a Coke and bring it in after lunch. I feel worse about the drinking, but afaik, never got caught. Couldn't imagine doing that now, but I could probably imagine pleasure in the bathroom still. Story 58. I was a team lead and winded up slept with 3 of my coworkers. One day I was working open to close, and all 3 were scheduled that day. 1 opening, 1 mid-shift, 1 closing. I hooked up with all 3 of them in the same day as they swapped off shifts. Neither knew I was hooking up with the others. Story 59. Gave a BJ to a delivery guy in the back of his truck. Next week, got a BJ from the same delivery guy in the back of his truck. Then I quit the job. The only nice thing about it was weekly sex in the back of a truck, and that would probably get old after a few times more. Story 60. My friend duck his manager on the prep table at Applebee's. He pulled out when she pooped on his junk, but said screw it and went back in to finish. Guess where I never eat. Story 61. Had sex with my girlfriend, now wife, against the TV in the training room at a restaurant. And of course, the next day, our manager brought it down to watch a training video about Angus beef. You could see a large pair of handprints and a small pair of handprints in the dust. I had trouble keeping it together. Story 62. Recently, my not-so-great assistant store manager, I'm not a manager, found out about a rapper called Lil and looked him up while at work. Well, you know, naked after reading and seeing all the warnings on the post because of what it implies. He continued the search to see not the rapper, but literal. Story 63. I worked at Walmart as a teen, and I'd crack open boxes of Halloween chocolate, grab a couple of random toys, like stretch lizards, Tamagotchi, or half-stolen boxes of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and go hide out in a box fort I made outside in the shelving and garden, and play with them, eat chocolate for hours until my shift was up. Story 64. Coworker clocked me and another coworker in for 3 days straight, while the 2 of us were sick as duck. We didn't ask him to, he was just disgruntled and hated the company. So I was on the clock while gaming, reading, and smoking Story 65. Prob just drank beers with a landscaping coworker. We each brought 6 cans in our coolers and had a blast mowing with a big buzz. I went around a corner too fast and my buddy fell out of the truck and rolled down a huge drainage ditch. Door latch was sketchy. He was busted up pretty good. Story 66. Made out with my manager, not me but my GF at the time, worked photo center, and there was a strict no adult film rule. She figured out how to delete the memory of what was printed and would bring me nude photos she'd print of herself to me while we worked. Story 67. Worked at a small agricultural co-op. During our off-season, we'd have to find crap to do to stay busy. Boss would save his vacation time for the summer and be gone for literally weeks between May and September. We would take naps in the warehouse, play video games, etc. Story 68. I masticate every time I'm on the clock. Every single time, I masticate. It feels so good. Sometimes I do it for an hour. Bit most times, just 30 minutes of mastication and 30 minutes to just sit back and relish in the feeling of satisfaction. Story 69. This was not me. I worked in a chocolate factory, and one day my colleague told me he used to take the triplet nut, direct translation, and rub it on his balls before it went into the boxes. I still think about that way too often 15 years later. Story 70. Worked at the mall food court Subway after high school. It was usually dead after 7 and we would get sloppy drunk. The sandwich quality for those late customers was not great, but never heard a peep about it, and it was a regular occurrence for a couple years. People, what's the most NSFW thing you've seen happen at work? Story 1. I work at a psych hospital, so there are plenty. Objects inserted into orifices where they don't belong, frequent disrobing, and lewd comments are pretty much the norm. It doesn't faze me at this point, but one experience is etched into my mind. There was a 450-pound woman with borderline personality disorder, major trauma history, and plenty of other destabilizing factors that made her life hell, but in turn, made our daily lives hell trying to keep her safe and treat her. On the daily, she's a mess of emotions. Crying, laughing, angry, playful, panicky. Sometimes all of those within an hour. She could be saying that you're the best staff to ever work with her one moment and hurling chairs at you the next. It's the nature of her disorder, and she had it bad. Despite her being abused by many men in the past and having very inappropriate boundaries with everyone, my supervisor at the time thought it would be fun for a young male therapist in training about the same age as her to be her primary treating clinician. I could see the reasoning. I needed the training, and she needed to learn healthy boundaries with men and that not all men would hurt her. It was a trying several months with lots of emotional swings and unpleasantness, but we made some progress and she had fewer episodes of self-harm, seclusion, restraint, and inappropriate behaviors with others. I had been feeling like I did some good and made awesome progress. She had always been testing the boundaries with me, but I had been pretty firm with making sure that she knew comments about attraction to me were inappropriate for our treatment relationship and shut it down quick. I didn't think much more of it because it was part of her problem testing boundaries with many men, not just me. And I had made it clear that it was unwelcome. Colleagues joked about her attraction, but I laughed it off. Anyway, on with the NSFW story. One day she was mad at me, which wasn't too out of the ordinary. I think on that day I enforced that she didn't get extra phone privileges for some inappropriate behavior the night before. I knew she would be a little upset, but I had done it other times before and figured she'd be okay, and left that unit to do some other work. I got a call a short time later saying, "You had better get down here." They didn't give me any more information than that. I figured she was just throwing a fit or self-harming, but I wasn't prepared for what was really going on. I walked onto the unit to see this 450-pound woman standing on top of a table, screaming at staff to get away or she'll jump on them. Our staff at that hospital was great, but they weren't about to find out what that felt like. So they were more than happy to let this therapist go in there to try to solve this. The moment she saw me, her anger turned immediately to a blubbering stream of tears and emotion. "I thought you loved me. Why did you do this to me?" All over phone privileges. I tried to reinforce issues from our therapy, highlighting why those rules or structure and boundaries were good for her, even if it upset her, and spent some time verbally attempting to comfort and de-escalate her so she would come down. But then, as quickly as the anger turned to sadness, the sadness turned to lust, because she then puts her hand down the front of her pants and starts telling me how she thinks about me at night. I'm trying to hold back vomit and the urge to walk out to try and reinforce that this isn't appropriate. Then, right there, still standing on the table in the lunchroom in full view of staff and her peers, off comes the shirt. She was starting to work on her pants, and I started to walk away to send female staff in with her. This was too much for me. She shouted after me, "Don't go." I reiterated one last time, "Get down." She said, "I will, but I need something from you." I realized it was stupid to respond, but I naturally asked, "What is it?" I'll never forget the reply. She said, "I need about tree fitty." Well, it was about that time I recognized this patient was actually a 20-story tall monster from the Paleolithic era. I said, "God damn it, monsters, I'm not giving you no tree fitty." I walked out of that unit and didn't go back the rest of the day. I assume the staff took care of it. My job is interesting, but it brings out the ugly monster that lurks underneath with some people. Story 2. I used to deliver pizzas to a brothel. They would order 2-3 times a week, usually a small pizza and maybe some salads. Very nice people. Usually someone would be in the office wearing lingerie or something, but sometimes they'd be working or recently finished working, so they would be in various stages of undress. Every single time, I would treat them exactly like I did anyone else. Me. "Hello, I see you ordered 2 small pepperonis and a Diet Coke. Is that correct?" Customer. While putting clothes back on. Yeah, me. "All right, your total will be $13.52. Hands over stack of dollar bills, including a tip." "All right, thanks for your business and have a nice day." I have a pretty good poker face. Story 3, seen an old lady crap in the middle of the store and was told to clean it up. I refused, and my manager, the owner's son, went crazy and threatened me with my job. His dad came down and asked why it wasn't cleaned up yet, and he blamed it on me. I said, there was no chance I'm going near it. It was half solid, half crap soup. Boss handed his son the mop and said, I don't want someone to blame, I want you to clean it. There's something very satisfying watching your a-hole manager with his sleeves pulled up, mopping up the toxic waste of a pensioner. Story 4. Back in high school, I used to work at a grocery store. There was this woman who gave out samples of food and other products for people to buy. Anyhow, she would always get ducked by the guys working in the meat department, and they would have sex on the meat packaging machine. We dubbed her as the sausage sampler. Story 5. We had a new female receptionist. The owner, named Richard but goes by Junk, came in and was meeting with her. One of the other female employees walked up and gave Junk a hug. He then turned to the new receptionist and said, "If you want to move up in this company, you gotta love Junk." Story 6. When I was an electrician, I was working this huge hospital remodel with about 20 guys from our company all working in different parts of the hospital. I got a job ticket to run some pipe back in the older part of the hospital that was semi-closed for remodel. Me and 2 other guys went to do the job. We opened the door to the panel closet to find a guy from another crew with a nurse bent over with his hard hat on her head just going at it. He really should have been wearing that hard hat. Very not safe for work. As OSHA would have walked in there, he might have gotten a fine. Story 7. I used to work in the same building with my wife, and I had an office with a locking door and no windows. So yeah, I've seen a lot of NSFW stuff. Story 8. I was an assistant manager of a retail swimming pool store. As the assistant manager, I got stuck with manager on duty on the days the actual manager didn't want to. Weekends and holidays. This particular incident was the 4th of July. Typically, the 4th of July is pretty dead in pool stores because everyone is out enjoying their pools. The store was overstaffed with 2 stock boys, a cashier, 2 salespeople, a service coordinator, and me. With the store manager out, I wasn't about to crack the whip on these poor folks who came in on a holiday and essentially had no work to do. So we were all standing around chewing the fat. The 2 stock boys were bringing up supplies from the back storage with the forklift. This is where it gets ugly. Apparently, they were both riding the forklift, with one driving and one hitching a ride on the side. If you've ever taken a forklift safety course, you know this is a big no-no, exactly because of what was about to happen. The driver took a sharp turn, and the passenger fell off. The forklift then ran over his foot. The driver, worried he was still on the other guy's foot, he wasn't, proceeded to put the forklift in reverse and run over it again. I hear screaming and expletives spewing out outside the store, and the poor guy who had his foot ran over comes running, hobbling very fast, inside before collapsing on the floor. There is blood everywhere. My one salesman who is afraid of blood just books it. He just started running. I managed to keep everyone calm, direct someone to call 911, and I elevated his foot and pressed towels against the wound to slow the bleeding until the paramedics arrived. The poor kid almost lost his foot because of it. In fact, he almost lost his life when he went septic from infection a few days later. The ankle began to go necrotic and they almost amputated. Last I heard, he was doing okay, still had his foot, but he'll never walk the same again. I didn't actually see them on the forklift. I caught that part on the store cameras afterwards. I also quit a few months after this. This wasn't the reason I quit, but it was definitely one of the contributing factors. Story 9. A girl started the same day as the holiday party. She was dancing and drinking. The CEO came onto the floor and this new woman, a little tipsy, pulls out her massive tits and shoved them in his face. She was not at work the next day or ever again. Sad. Story 10. I used to be a store manager at Sneaker Sporting Goods store in the mall. One of my co-managers was ducking one of my employees in that back stock room after the store closed on a regular basis. This was going on for several months, apparently. I found out when said teenager came to me, and she said that my co-manager promised her a raise that she never got. I asked her why he said that he would give her a raise. That is when she told me about the sex in the stockroom. I had to call the police and corporate about this. We arranged a sting with help of the girl, as she acted out for the police that to meet up with my co-manager after work. Basically, caught him with his pants down, to use the term. Story 11. Some scumbag on my shift punched his wife in the parking lot while everyone was out there on break. Quite a surreal moment that all of us couldn't believe happened. The delay of reaction felt like forever since we were just in awe. He was arrested and fired, but yeah, that was something. Story 12. In the various kitchens I've worked in over the years, I've seen plenty of NSFW stuff. Probably the most NSFW would be the time a cook bought 4 grosses of bottle rockets on his way to work and proceeded to shoot them at staff when they would go on break. He was ballsy about it too. He'd break the stick off of the bottle rocket and stealthily light it and slip it into someone's coat pocket when they weren't looking. We're lucky nobody got hurt. Another time, the same cook in the aforementioned story took one of the waitresses into the basement, a really, really nasty basement at that, and they get sex. The man in question was an IV substances user. so nobody wanted to risk touching it. A separate restaurant I worked at was co-owned by a man and his ex-wife. The ex was a bit of a loose woman, so to speak, and would make a point of parading young men in front of her ex-husband to make him jealous. This came to a head when I got promoted from cook to sous chef. After the meeting was over, she asked me to follow her down into the cellar to go over my new duties. When we got down there, she drops to her knees, pulls down her shirt to reveal her breasts, and very loudly declares that it's time for my congratulatory BJ. I go the duck out of there as fast as I could, but her ex, who was at the top of the stairs, I just finished in under a minute. I quit the next week. Story 13. A few years ago, I was working in an office and they were going to have a holiday party where the boss's wife showed up. She was a beautiful and elegant-looking woman with brilliant red hair. My boss took her around to every person, including me, and introduced us to her. I remember thinking he was a very lucky man. We had an hour before the catering would be ready, so we went back to work and he took his wife to his office. No one thought anything about it because we had our jobs to do. The party starts and we see the boss again, smiling so happy, and I notice stuck in his teeth is a little red hair. I even remember that hair wasn't in his teeth when he introduced me to his wife. Everyone could see it in his smile, and no one was able to say anything. Finally, one of the other people just couldn't keep his mouth shut and said, "You've got a red hair stuck in your teeth." Every face in the room was bright red because he realized that he'd been walking around with that hair in his teeth and figured what he and his wife were doing while they were in his office. His wife didn't even realize it. She looked at him pull that little red hair free of his teeth and she hid her face with both hands. You ever see 24 people try to hold in laughing? I felt so bad for the embarrassment of the two, but goddamn was it impossible to keep from laughing. Story 14. In one of my jobs, we joke about the bathroom being soundproof because you can hear a lot from outside. One day the new guy hear that, but doesn't get it as a joke. 2 days later, sounds come from the bathroom. The guy was pleasure himself furiously with adult film on the cell phone. Story 15. So I worked at a medium-sized amusement park this summer as a cook in a food shack attached to a sports bar sort of institution. We shared a walk and cooler with the bar guys. This becomes important later. We get this kid in, I don't really remember the rest. 320 lbs. 5'6" of piss-poor attitude, starts halfway through the summer. And on, I crap you not, his third day, I walk into the cooler, and here he is, chowing down on a full pizza, 4.5 beers into a top-shelf 6-pack of fancy foreign brew skies, with his shirt off, pleasure himself. To what? I don't know. So we lock the doors of the cooler, because why not, while we get the security big bosses down here to escort him out of the premises. So basically, the owner of the park shows up in his truck, we explain the situation to him, and he ends up calling the cops. Well, apparently Einstein had been listening through the door. What he heard, I'm not sure. Charged out of the cooler, dropping joints out of his pants all the way, giving the boss the double bird. That dude got arrested for possession with the intent to distribute, indecent public exposure, grand theft, and he got rung up on several health code violations. He got us shut down for 3 weeks for his escapade. Please do remember, this was halfway through his third day of work. The previous 2, he had spent sitting on his ass watching MLB and one-way flirting with the married bartender, who happened to be a dude. Story 16. I once returned from a pizza delivery run to find the front of the store empty. I walked to the back of the store and found both of the managers do substances. I was used to them smoking in the walk-in. Any pizza you've ever ordered has been handled by someone on some form of substances. Story 17. I have a slight advantage at this one. I'm a rock and roll stage guy. I've seen more workplace NSFW than most. I've seen countless pairs of boobs flashed at the band. I've seen underwear thrown on stage and then proudly show the band there was nothing left underneath her skirt. I've even had some pairs shown to me as a way of starting a "can you get me backstage" conversation. I've seen tits being signed and signed a few pairs myself. I've seen people ducking in tucked away corners at festivals, all that sort of crazy crap you've seen or heard about at those kind of events. One particularly funny one was at a major festival and a woman was dancing at the barrier. Whilst grooving away, her top came down on one side, leaving her partly bare-chested, and one of those rubber things that looks kind of like a chicken fillet that makes your boobs look bigger falls out. Everyone steps back and this girl freaks out. About 3 seconds later, this girl still has no idea if the chicken fillet is a total loss or if it's salvageable and a guy standing beside her grabs it and throws it up on stage. She's left standing there, still with one tit out, the other one twice its size, totally at a loss as to what has just happened. Rock and roll is still a crazy place to work sometimes. Story 18, story time. In my previous job, my workstation was close to the washroom that is shared by 2-3 departments. Thing is, this washroom is for one person at a time only. So if it's occupied, you'd have to walk all the way to the other side of the office to go to the other washroom. But I digress. This one fateful day, I stayed late to get some crap done. Although my workstation was close to the washroom, you can't see it directly from the washroom door, as there was a divider, I guess for us to not be distracted by people going to the washroom. I stepped out for a bit, and when I passed by the washroom, I noticed that it was occupied. I could hear soft, grunting, groaning sounds in there, and I thought, oh, someone's having a hard time pooping, and went back to my desk. A few minutes later, I could hear the person just frantically tearing up toilet paper. Walls are very thin, and the dispenser was bulky, which made it noisy. I stood up to grab my printouts. Printer was close to the washroom. And that's when I saw two guys walking out of the single-person washroom. They saw me, and the look of horror on their faces was something I will never forget. Story 19. One of our customers rented a truck and ended up beating it up quite a bit. The muffler was especially bad and was bent at around 80 degrees, so it wasn't quite closed off, but went from pointing out the back to point to the side. Anyways, my attic manager decided he could easily fix it with the forklift we have on site, instead of just taking it to the shop like a normal ducking person. I noticed what he was doing and went out to watch him. In his attempts to get the forks hooked on the other side of the tailpipe, he figured he should just lift the ducking truck up with the forklift and start just backing up. Pretty soon, he's got the pickup lifted up from the back corner, left so high that only the front right tire's on the ground. And when he tried backing up to pull the tailpipe straight, the whole truck slips off and drops about 4 or 5 feet. When I saw him start to lift the truck a second time, I pulled a big old nope and walked away, wanting no part in that. He ended up not really damaging the truck, but holy crap, was that sketchy. It was a pleasure to see his ass get fired a few months later. Story 20. I worked for Guitar Center, and we would have the absolute weirdest people come in. Over time, you would just get used to it, but one guy came in and really set the bar. He came in and was all disheveled and just wanted to know where the bathroom was. He went to the bathroom and was probably in there for like 40 minutes. He then just walks out and we never see him again. Well, we go into the bathroom and there's blood everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Toilet, the door, the sink, the floor, the walls, and it was horrifying. We had to call in a hazmat professional cleaner people to clean it all up. Another quick one is an older guy came into the store and walked from the front all the way to the back of the store, just crafting down his leg. Good times, story 21. I worked at the corporate offices of a local game store, and after one employee quit, they went through his work computer and found tons of images of female profile pictures he collected from MySpace. Oh, he also had a ton of photos of himself, step by step showing how to insert a sex toy. Story 22. Work at a children's hospital. 3 moms, who didn't know each other outside the hospital, were on our long-term units because of issues at birth with their children due to substances. They were addicts. They started a trading ring in the hospital. One lady had a connection, her boyfriend, to bring the junk to the parking garage. She would go collect it, then she would sell it to the other junkies in the hospital. It started off friendly, helping each other out by sharing. Then it got into sales. One girl stopped paying. Whenever the two would see the other person, hell would break loose. They even restricted each other from visiting their babies. Every day radios would go hot when they would see the car drive in. The mom that got the pickups would go outside, and the other ladies would wait in the lobby. Seeps was on standby. Police were on standby. Everyone was itching to bust them. Eventually they did for paraphernalia, but wasn't enough for CPS because it could have been from a visitor or some BS about how she didn't know it was there because it was hidden in the bathroom. Story 23. I'm a low-voltage electrician. I was installing a system in a hospital downtown during the night shift. We just so happened to be in the emergency area. I was working with another guy since the area had the occasional ambulance drop-off and EMTs running with their bed thingies. So while my partner's head was up in the ceiling working, I'm keeping an eye out for stuff that would require him to get down and move the ladder. I overhear a man getting put in a room speaking incoherently. As we get closer down the hall, it sounds as if he's arguing with someone. No big deal, just keep going about my business. Suddenly my nostrils are assaulted by the intense smell of feces. The dude crap himself. So the nurse casually walks into his room and tells him to use the restroom and shower down the hall. This man comes out of his room where I finally see him. Dude is at least 300 pounds, completely naked and covered in crap below the waist. So I tell my partner it's time to pack up and we'll be back later because that smell is too much for us. We came back later that night and the dude was running around naked. We gave up after that. I hate hospitals. Story 24. I used to work for a large company where their IT department would periodically send out updated links to applications that were necessary for our jobs. One morning I was hovering over an employee's shoulder, helping her troubleshoot an issue she was having when one of this update emails came through. Not sure where the misstep occurred, but when you clicked the link in that email, it didn't direct you towards the update, but rather a hardcore adult film. You could hear as each person opened that email by the shocked gasps springing up throughout our cubicle field. Story 25. About 20 years ago, construction job just out of high school, working in Oakland on a job across the parking lot from one of those mattress delivery warehouses. About 15 of us were on our morning break around 9:30, sitting on our tailgates in the parking lot. a worker comes storming out of the warehouse. He stands outside screaming for a few minutes. We're cracking up. His manager comes out and starts yelling back, tells him to get lost. They scream back and forth for a while. "I'll duck you up." "No, I'll duck you up." Dude gets in his car and drives away, and we go back to work. We take lunch at noon, and we're all sitting outside again. Yelling dude drives back into the parking lot, parks, and gets out. He stands outside screaming and yelling for about 5 minutes. The manager comes out again and starts yelling back at him, saying he's gonna duck him up. Worker pulls out a gun, hit his boss, gets in his car, and drives away. Story 26. Saw a guy's junk in a parking lot. I was on break and he was pissing between two cars facing me. I looked him in the eyes, glanced at his junk and back to his eyes and said, "Why?" I walked away without getting an answer. Story 27. There was a huge amount of fecal-related incidents at the last retail job I worked. A few specifics stand out. An older lady who bent over to pick up her purse and sprayed diarrhea on the wall, a pair of pants an employee jettisoned into a toilet after crapping himself, and a crap slide. The crap and slide is the most amusing to me. I really had to crap and only one stall was open, which had poo on the floor. Being in a hurry, I figured I'd use it and avoid the poop. I got to looking while doing my business, my phone was in my locker, and noticed there was an impact where someone had shat and a smear, as if the heel of someone's foot had impacted with it and slid out from under them, and there were handprints. Looking further, it looked like someone had tried to wipe poop off their fingers on the floor stall wall. I can only try to piece together what happened there that day, but someone deaf had a worse day than me. Story 28. Saw a garbage man climb into the compactor and get squashed. He was conscious, kinda sad, but cracking really dumb funny jokes, like, "Hey, I think I rolled my ankle." There was only like an inch or two of space between him and some very compacted stuff. Called 911 and our security staff and wanted to back up the machine, but it was stuck. I am glad to this day I was not able to pull him out. They were able to call his wife so she could talk to him one last time. From the third or fourth ribs down, he was meat. It was super sad. I held her hand and walked with her to her car after they removed him. I had to shoulder her up. Her knees were so wobbly and she was sobbing. Yeah, I cried too. Story 29. It was a large Canadian telecommunications equipment provider that doesn't exist anymore. We had an old school video conferencing system that used dedicated circuits between specific conference rooms in different locations and old style 3-foot thick projection screens. In our building, the conference room was right next to the captive office where engineers worked nights. It wasn't always clear when it was on. You could turn off the monitor that shows what was going on in the other end, but still be broadcasting your end. Evidently, the last meeting of the day didn't turn it off correctly. We know this because in the remote office, engineers were sitting in the conference room, having an impromptu meeting when the TV set at the end of the table, which had been showing an empty conference room, showed two of their US colleagues having a quickie. Because the monitor set on the US site was turned off, the Americans had no idea that their tryst was being streamed live to a conference room full of engineers 600 miles away. Story 30. I saw my two lesbian coworkers naked, except for shoes, and do it in the deep freeze at the Ben & Jerry's we worked at. It was an eye-opening experience to say the least. Story 31. This is a stretch because I work in workers' comp, so I wasn't technically there when it happened. I had a security surveillance video of a guy climbing a ladder set up on top of a scaffolding that was set up in a stairwell. The guy fell off the ladder and bounced off the scaffold and the stairs. Story 32. In the midst of the Met epidemic on the West Coast, a Met head came into the pizza joint I was working at and asked all the patrons and employees for a cigarette. She was clearly high, so I gave her a few cigarettes just to get rid of her. Before she left, she flashed her tits at the whole restaurant as a thank you. Being a malnourished Met head, her chest was covered in scabs and pancaked. The worst tits I'd ever seen. The milk had gone bad. Story 33. I used to work for an IT company that contracted out to lots of smaller businesses that had no use for a dedicated ET guy, but still needed it. Support of a level above your standard repair shops. A bunch of the GMs of these companies took trips to Thailand every now and then. They were all friends and worked in complementary companies, hydraulics, piping, fitting, labor contracting, stuff like that, and would go together in one big lot. They were pretty chummy with my boss, too. This means that at least once a year, I was asked to clean out phones and folders on PCs of these 50, 70-year-old blokes whose wives usually work with them. Duck all different types of escort in hotel rooms. Everything was above the board, from what I saw, but it must be like a lab tech handing results back to a doctor. Such a can of worms, but not my problem. Story 34. Former coworker was an alcoholic and, come to find out, addict, so of course he had horrible issues. I mean, a brisk wind could cause a shirt at any given moment, and he actually full-blown crap his pants on numerous occasions. One time in particular, it was coming out of his pant leg like a constant stream, and he tracked it across our entire warehouse, like some junky version of Hansel and Gretel. Another former coworker was out for a few days and, terrified of getting fired, insisted on showing everyone a picture of his hemorrhoids to prove he had a legit reason to miss work. Just walked right up to the president of the company, shoved his phone in his face, and showed him a picture. Story 35. I was a customer service manager at an electronics store and had an office that overlooked the customer service desk, complete with tinted windows and blinds. Many BG and various forms of foreplay happened in there with an employee I was hooking up with. A bar I worked at had a regular hot body contest. The weekly winner was whichever girl actually decided to get her tits out for free hockey tickets. Working the bar at another establishment, I had some giveaway temporary tattoos for a new liquor that came out. A bar friend of mine decided it would be fun to let me out a tattoo on each of her tits, basically above each nipple. After that, 2 random girls at the bar decided to let me judge who had the best hard nipples, judged strictly by cupped hand.